When I went home yesterday, both of the stocks I owned were down, and now they're up so much I'm in second place. I'm telling you. Best part is you can't see my stock, but I can see what everybody else owns. This is why you become a teacher. To rig games in your favor. Gotta have the live stream going. All right, guys. Yeah, take a second here. We're not going to have a ton of time today to look at and mess with the stock market game, but you can definitely take a look at it. If you weren't here yesterday, your neighbors might be able to get you started. If we need to, you can stay after for a second. I can get you started on it. But today we got some things we got to talk about. Tomorrow is going to be the day where you can spend some time with that stock market game. Tomorrow I will not be here. Mrs. Belson will be your sub. And my instructions to her are that you should use tomorrow for one of two purposes. One, if you want to, you can spend the whole period on the stock market game. Some students just like to watch their portfolio and see what happens. It's like sitting by a bonfire. Just stare into the fire. Nothing gets accomplished, but you just can't take your eyes off it. Right? So whatever you want, that's fine. That's an option for you. What I might recommend, though, are the journals. Okay, the journals, this first stretch here have been all messed up because of the weather delays. And I don't know that that's anybody's fault. It just is what it is. But we're getting to the point now where they are going to come up due. They're not due tomorrow. They're due on Tuesday. But you've got Journal 6, which is on there now, actually. I just went ahead and loaded it up there. And it's tied to what we're going to be talking about today. So I wouldn't get on there right now and try to answer it. But certainly tomorrow, I'm not going to be giving any additional homework or anything like that. So tomorrow would be a good time to maybe get on there. If you've missed some of those, they're all up there on the website, including Journal 6, and get those done. Now, even though they're due on Tuesday, you can certainly share those with me early so that you don't have to worry about it. But Tuesday will be the last day that I'll take those for full credit. All right? With regards to the stocks, just remember that this is for extra credit. It's also to hopefully help us to understand a little bit about how this works as we relate it to the Great Depression. It is an extra credit opportunity, and as I said, it has nothing to do with where you are right now. So some of you may be seeing, a net loss right now. That's okay. All right. I think there's only 8 or 9 of us that are in the profit. Okay. That number may grow. That number may shrink. I was telling Ethan that student in my 7th period class, just over the course of 4th period, went from 1st to 12th 3 times. All right, so there's something fluctuating in the stocks that he owns, and that happens. All that you have to try to do, though, is by Thursday of next week, get yourself into the positive, even if it's just by a penny, and you'll be in line for that extra credit. One thing, though, that I want to make clear. If you bought no stock, if you never touched it, you would probably make it like $1 profit. And you may think, well, that's a good strategy. I'll just do that. If you don't buy any stock, you are not going to be eligible for the extra credit. So you have to play even just a little bit. Even if you just buy one, you have to buy at least one stock and see what it'll do for you. If you buy the right one, then maybe all you need. I'm doing fairly solid right now, and I only own 2. But if you sell them and you buy the right one, you can get right back up. It's definitely not I'm out of there. Okay? There's still hope. There's still hope. All right. So take a second there. Once we're done with this, we are going to do the last whole group discussion today and get that done. Tomorrow, like I said, pretty easy. And then next week, Monday through Thursday, because you guys are out on Friday, Monday through Thursday, we'll be doing more of the hands-on stuff as it's tied to the Great Depression and the New Deal that will follow it. So I'm going to go ahead and send around our questions for today, give you a minute with the stock market, and then we'll get started on this last group discussion. All right. Yes. Okay, go to your portfolio, Richard. I didn't understand how it goes up. But you would hit that, you would ask for confirm. Oh, commission fee? I'll take a 10% commission. Yeah, on the game. Well, may not like, it's not real. Okay, I didn't want you to think you actually had it.
Oh, I think it's
Yeah, right. Chipotle, people who listen to me about Chipotle,
Yep.
it's been helping. I don't know much, but I don't. Right? It's not that good.
It's really not. That's the Starbucks one.
To the wedding, huh? I've seen worse.
Mr. Black,
What?
what does buying power mean? Is that how far you go?
No, that means that's, hypothetical money that you could spend. Buying power may be a little bit more than your portfolio value.
What's your balance?
The thing that I'm concerned about, that reflects how well you spend.
I feel like I
You
say
really don't
every
want to spend
week,
more
but
than
this is the
20
longest
because that
week.
extra amount. Basically.
I promise every week of my
Hey, if you've all got the questions in front of you, I'm going to have you guys do something real quick. Question number 6. Cross it out. Question number 6 is a no, and I do want you to cross it out to help me as I grade these. Question number 6 is a no answer. All right, we're going to go ahead and get rolling here. I'm going to ask that you close your Chromebooks for now. This is, I think all the things we talked about in here, I try to have these kinds of discussions focus in on like the key things that we really need to know. But there are some of these that I think are maybe a little bit more jam-packed than others, and this is definitely one of them. Because as I said yesterday, I think we're really talking about something that's got to be in maybe those top 5 major moments in U.S. history. This is something that's going to be impacting just about everybody. And I want to make sure, you guys already know what the Great Depression is. I'm not worried about you guys not knowing that. What I want to make sure, though, is that we understand why the Great Depression happened, why it is so bad. What are the circumstances surrounding that? That's really the big thing that I'm going to focus in on today, all right? So, like I said, question 6, if you haven't already, draw a line through that. You're not going to have to answer that. But as we get started here with this discussion, I want to make sure that we understand a couple of pretty important terms as they apply to economics, today's discussion, and those are going to be booms and busts. Now, if I were to ask you right now, I feel like you could probably give me at least a pretty solid guess as to what you think those words mean, especially since we know we're talking about the Great Depression. But just so we're clear here, a boom is going to be a period of time during which the stock market is not going to just go up. Some of you, as you bought your stocks, you hopefully looked at that little table of information they give you, and hopefully you're seeing the jagged lines going in the right direction. And we wouldn't classify that as a boom. All right, a boom is going to be an upwards movement that is sharp, and it's going to hit a really high peak level. It's a huge rise in the stock market, and that's what we've got going on throughout most of the 1920s. All right, we've come back from World War I. And we really are the only country in the world at that point that is financially doing really well. You know, we haven't lost anything because of the war. If anything, we've gained a lot. I mean, think about it. We were supplying a lot of these countries by ourselves, and you know, it's not like we're giving all that stuff for free. Whether it's tanks, guns, whatever it might be, we're selling all of that, and we're making a ton of money. Employment is really high. You know, and conversely, unemployment is really low. It's a good time. It's a good time to be an American. I think that this definitely, you know, is a contributing factor for the roaring part of the Roaring 20s. People are happy. They're doing well. And that usually means that they're spending money. And in this case, investing in the stock market. So most of the 1920s, things are really good. I want to give you an example of, you know, a part of this boom. Just pick one company and just use that as an example. This is obviously before television. The radio is going to be the in-home entertainment option. There's all sorts of radio companies out there. One of those is RadioCorp. And as you can see up here, this is 1923, so right in the middle of that. The early part of 23, you could buy a single share of RadioCorp. Hopefully you know what I mean when I say that now. Now that we've been playing this game, all right, you know what I mean when I say you're buying a share of RadioCorp. You could do that for $85, which, I mean, that's not bad. And we compare that to today. Some of you have been buying stocks right around that range. But by the end of 1923, all right, as you can see, it had gone from 85, now it's $420 a share. All right, I mean, that's a huge jump. All right, that would be a good example of a boom. Right, you know, if it were 85 to 95, you know, I mean, that's good, but it's not a boom. This, though, I mean, we're talking about, you know, almost like a 300% improvement here. That's a huge effort there. So imagine if you're one of those people, maybe you bought 500 shares at $85. You know, you're doing well for yourself if you did that. Now it's up to 420. But this is the reality of the stock market leading up to that infamous day in 1929. Okay. Another factor that explains why we've got a boom going on, I mean, basically what we want to see, when we see the stock market go down, this is even still right now, when we see the stock market go down, a lot of times it's because people get scared and they start to sell their stock. All right, what we want are Americans who are feeling good, who are feeling confident, who are spending money, and who are buying stocks. All right, so throughout the 1920s, people are feeling good. 1928 rolls around, and we're going to see the United States elect a guy who is immensely popular. Now, we've heard this name before. Where did we hear this name first? Say it again.
He was the guy who sent over stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, and let's be clear here. He's not necessarily supplying the military, right? What's he doing? Yeah, right? Yeah, he's sending food. He's sending some water, supplies like that over. So all across the world, certainly in Europe, Herbert Hoover's looked at with very high esteem. Over here in the United States, yeah, you know, it's hard not to like a guy that does that. We get to 1928, things are going well. Herbert Hoover is a businessman. We talked about that. He owned a mining company. He's doing very well for himself. He's known to be a good mind with money and runs for president. You know, all of these things combined, it's an easy choice, easy win for Herbert Hoover. And he's president. And Americans, this is just another thing to make you feel good. Okay, the election of Herbert Hoover encourages Americans to spend even more, and better yet, to invest even more into the stock market. You know, you can make all sorts of money on the stock market. You know, if you invest that money, you can make a lot of money. As long as the stock market continues to go in the right direction. That's the risk here, right? If the stock market tanks, you could end up really screwed. Okay? But that's not what people are feeling right now. They're feeling good about things. In fact, they're feeling so good that we start to see some reckless investment. And I want to talk a little bit about, this gets into question 3 here. I want to talk a little bit about margin buying. This is an incredibly reckless practice here. All right, so let me explain this, take a few minutes and explain this so that we can all understand what buying on margin, what that means. Let's use that Radio Core stock that we were talking about just a minute ago. Do you remember what was the peak value for Radio Core stock? You remember that number? 420. Stock pretty high.
Oh my God.
Try to fish. Anyway, I'm here all night. That's really fun. Right, here we go. Okay, here we go. Let me explain to you how this works. Who am I going to pick on? Who's my investor here? Okay, Rachel had her hand up first. Rachel's my investor. Here's the deal. Rachel has been working the stock market for a few years now. She's doing well for herself, and she's really confident that the stock market is going to continue to trend in the right direction, and she's going to continue to buy or to make a lot of money. So now, having made a lot of money, Rachel now wants to do what? Make more money, all right? Make more money. So she's going to start investing in some higher value stock, like Radio Core. Rachel's problem, though, is, make sure we're all on this, guys. This is key. I lose students sometimes here, so I want everybody focusing here. Rachel's problem here with buying this stock, though, is that she does not have the money to spend $420 per share, but she wants it. All right, so she is going to buy this share on margin. What that means is she is going to go to a bank and she's going to ask them for a loan to help her buy this stock. And the way that this would work, these loans worked in that you, the investor, so in this case Rachel, you were expected to put forward half of the money. So Rachel's going to have to put forward for a single share, $210. And then the bank is going to put forward the other $210. Now, if she bought one share. If Rachel wants to buy 500 shares, just take those times 500, and that's the way this is going to work. Now, do you see how this could be risky? And is it only risky for Rachel? Who else is it risky for? It's risky for the bank as well. And, Rachel's hope is that, yeah, she's putting in a sizable amount of her own money, but this stock is doing really well. So it's going to keep going up. She's going to be turning a profit before she knows it. And not only is she going to make here, but she's going to be able to pay back the bank their money, plus a little bit of interest. It's a great deal. Bank's happy. They get their money back plus that interest. Everybody's happy. As long as what? Stocks go in the toilet, everybody is screwed. Now, I say that because guess what? The stocks about to go in the toilet. All right, yeah. So, all right. So that's going to flush some drinks. Sorry, I can't say. It wasn't correct. Oh, I don't care. Anyway. All right, now, all jokes aside here. All jokes aside. By the time we got into the early parts of 1929, there were a lot of the brains in this country that were looking at the economy, and looking at the stock market, and they were starting to see some things that were scaring them a little bit. The stock market had gone so high, so consistently, and at some point, right, every uphill has a downhill. And so by the time we got into 1929, There were individuals like a guy named Roger Babson. I'll never ask you to know that name, but I wanted to put that up there. He was one of this country's leading economists. I can speak. All right, economists. And, you know, this was his quote. You know, he's seeing some things that are getting him a little nervous. And he says, look, you know, I'm thinking a crash is coming. Notice the word he used. He doesn't say, you know, I'm thinking things might go down a little bit. He's predicting a crash, which investors probably should have looked at that word being used and started to sell some of their stuff, but they didn't. And he goes on to say, not only do I think this is going to be a crash, which is bad enough, but it could be terrific. I don't think that means terrific in a good way. So I don't know that we could say that this crash was completely out of the blue. There were people who saw something coming. They just weren't sure where it might be. All right? So as we go through 1929, and I love this chart. If you're a visual person like me, this chart is just, it's one of the best visuals I'll use all year. Talk about showing you how this is all going to play out. So as we go through 1929, you can see the trend is definitely up, and it's a pretty sharp up, and we're going to get to Labor Day. Okay, on that visual right there, the peak of that red line, that's Labor Day 1929, and that's where it's going to hit its highest point. That's when probably the last time that Americans were feeling real good about the stock market for a little while. Okay, once we get past Labor Day, it's going to be downhill, downhill, downhill. And, I mean, I'm hoping you guys can see this. This is not a gradual fall. This is a really sharp drop. You know, that right there should be all you need to know how devastating this is. Okay, from Labor Day into the next month, October, it's going to be a dramatic drop, and we're going to get to a day that history has started to call Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, single worst day in stock market history. And you got several things kind of at play here. When everybody realizes what has happened, you've got huge amounts of people trying to offload their stock as quickly as they can, with very little success because their stock doesn't have any value. You've got people running to the banks to try to get money out of their savings account as quickly as they can before the value of those starts to drop. And for some people, all right, this was such a scary thought that you did have people who were, throwing themselves out of windows. And this is a huge moment here for a lot of Americans. Now, I want to show you a newspaper clipping from that day. There's a couple of things that I think are kind of interesting on the newspaper. Number one, you can see this a few days later. You can see the word that the newspaper uses here. This is panic. I think that's an outstanding word to use. I think it's interesting over here. If you can't read that, I'll tell you what it says. It says stocks crash in rush to sell. Billions have been lost. Right? Billions. And that right there is a big deal. We're not talking about billions of dollars in 2019, which would be a lot of money. We're talking about 1929, billions of dollars. So this is just a huge drop. I did think it was interesting. I had a student ask me third period, who's buying stocks? Like, where's this money going? Where's this money going if it's disappearing? Well, I would answer that two ways. Number one, if you're Rachel and your stocks have hit the tank now and they have absolutely no value, Rachel needs to probably get rid of those, right? She needs to sell those if she can. And there's not going to be many people buying. Some of the people who were buying, that says Morgan. Remember the name J.P. Morgan? Well, eventually, U.S. Steel buys that, right? But J.P. Morgan who's got, more money, knows what to do with. Yeah, he's going to go to Rachel. He's going to say, sure, I'll buy your stock for, $5. Which is a problem for Rachel because she spent $420. So she's lost all that. Not only has she lost hers, but she's also lost the bank's money as well. JP Morgan says, I'll buy it, sure. Maybe it'll go back up someday and I'll become a billionaire another time over or something. But that's about the only hope that you've got. Otherwise, that money, it does. It's gone. The value doesn't exist anymore. That money is gone. All right? And, I would say here, and I want to get to question 5 here. Outside of the obvious issues to the individual American like Rachel, what are some of the other real negative financial realities? Well, keep in mind that, like we said, it's not just Rachel that's getting hurt here, it's the bank, right? You guys probably know how this works. If you have a mortgage on a home and you can no longer pay your mortgage, what happens? The bank will take your home, all right? And then they'll try to sell it to get as much money back as they possibly can. It's the same thing here. Rachel cannot pay what she borrowed from the bank. So the bank is going to take that stock. The bank is going to just take this over, and they're going to try to sell it for as much as they can possibly get, which is nothing. There are no buyers. And even the buyers that are there, like JP Morgan, they're not going to give you. You really think JP Morgan's going to come in and give you a full price for that stock? Heck no. He's all about making the profit. So what happens if the bank takes this over? They're trying to sell stock that was $420, and JP Morgan comes in and says, I'll give you $50 for it. Okay? Sure? But if you do that many, many, many times over, you've got banks closing because they're running out of money. They're not getting any of the money back that they've loaned. It's scary, guys, right? But this is not just individual Americans. This is whole banks shutting down because they're losing money just like the individual American. On top of that, this is just like the absolute turd on top here, okay? Turns out the United States was not doing quite as well as everybody thought it was. Even before the stock market crash, majority of Americans were living below the poverty line. This is pre-crash. So the poverty line, what does that mean? Poverty line right now is right around $25,000. That's household income. So if your household income, all of the earners that live in the house, if that all combines to be less than $25,000, then it can be said that you're living under the poverty line. Back then, that line was much smaller. But think about this, guys. 60% of Americans who are living for their entire household at $2,000 or less. So forget trying to pay your house bill. Good luck trying to buy food. The worst things I've seen in terms of photographic evidence of the Great Depression are pictures of parents who are selling their children. They can't feed them. They can't take care of them. They don't know what to do. So they've literally got their kids on the front porch, sign in the yard, kids for sale. That's where we're at. It's a devastating reality. By 1932, 1 out of every 4 Americans is unemployed. I mean, that's 25% of Americans without a job. Right now, we get real upset, real nervous if our unemployment percentage gets above 9. Right now, it's about 4.1. We're feeling pretty good. 25% unemployment. That's just. Yeah, if you're a visual guy visual person like me, here's your unemployment. I love this chart. This shows unemployment from before the Depression through 2010. Can you find the Depression on the chart? Now, somebody noticed third period. Talk about a low point, right? Like 2% unemployment. That's insane. We'll never get that. Why on earth would we get that low in unemployment? That is going to be, as horrible as World War II is, that is going to be the number one reason why we are able to get out of the Great Depression. Now, I don't want you to think that, people are just sitting around saying, gosh, this sucks. Now what are you going to do? Right? The government is going to try some things initially to try to pull us out of the Great Depression. And I wanted to mention one in particular here. And this is question 7, the Holy Smoot Tariff. Now, do we remember from last year? Well, I guess it was last year. Last semester. What is the tariff? Tax on imports. Very good. All right. So the idea behind this is what? Why do we use tariffs in the first place?
People buy more.
I heard it. What?
People buy more.
That's kind of what I'm looking for there. Okay, so it's a tariff. It's a tax on imported goods. If China wants to sell stuff here, they're going to have to pay a special tax in order to do that, which means that the cost of their product will be higher than an American good. So hopefully Americans will buy American. So that's the idea here. Is let's try to get Americans to buy American stuff, and that way we will put money back into the American economy, and our money, what little we have left, won't be going to China, Britain, or wherever. That's the idea behind this tariff. Now, the problem here is that when you put a tariff out, the countries that you're putting the tariff on generally get pretty angry. We're dealing with this right now. We have a tariff right now on China that we've actually raised. China is ticked. You're starting to hear the words trade war. That's not good. And that's what you started seeing here. Instead of this being a help to Americans, and I'll point this out here, over 1,000 American economists told the president, don't do this. This is going to come back and bite us in the butt. Turns out they were right. So a lot of countries viewed this, hear that term again, trade war. So countries that maybe could have been a friend to us, maybe could have helped us out, maybe could have loaned us a little bit of money, are now united in saying, screw you. You tried to screw us. We're not going to help you out. And so the United States finds itself basically on an island, right? A fourth of their population out of work, banks closing, nobody's got any money except for the JP Morgans of the country. And now all of a sudden we've lost all of our friends. Right? Hopefully you're starting to see why we call this the Great Depression. This is just mounds and mounds and mounds of bad news. Bad news. Right? And as we finish this, I want to give you some examples of that bad news. Who do you think is going to get blamed for all of this? That's just kind of the way it works. There's an old saying that heavy is the head that wears the crown. Did Herbert Hoover cause the Great Depression? Probably not. Now, he did sign things like this, which didn't help. But to suggest that Herbert Hoover caused the Depression, absolutely not. But he is the president, So he becomes the scapegoat. And just to give you some examples of this, you know, a lot of Americans are without a home now. So if you're looking for shelter, you know, you're going to live wherever you can, and you're going to build a home out of whatever you can get your hands on. So this is Seattle, 1934. The shanty towns. I mean, these little sheds are, some of this, you know, like old steel fencing, steel roof. Just throw them up together. That's your home now. These shanty towns started to call themselves Hoovervilles. And inside those Hoovervilles, you basically did whatever you had to do to survive. Hoover's Poor Farm Tobacco Fund. I love this. Hard times are still hoovering over us. It's like a really sad dad joke, right? But I'll ask you this. How many of you in your life have heard the phrase, piss poor? Or maybe you've heard the phrase, you're so poor you don't have a pot to piss in. Heard that before. This is where it gets started, right? What people used to do is they would have a bucket or a pot, and over the course of the day, everyone in the family would urinate in the bucket or the pot. And then in the evening, you would take that, and you would take it to what they called tanneries. A lot of clothing back at that time was made out of animal hides. And you can't just, you know, kill an animal, strip the hide, and put it over your shoulder. You gotta cure it. You gotta dry it out, make it into something that you can actually use. And so what a lot of these places did is to cure it and to dry out the hides from animals, they would rub urine into the hide. And it would dry out those hides. So what these people would do is they'd pee in all day in that pot, and they would go to this tannery and sell their urine to that place just to make a little bit of money. So if that is what you were forced to do, then that is where you were said to be piss poor. But if you were even worse than that, if you couldn't even afford a bucket or a pot to urinate in, then you were so poor that you didn't even have a pot to piss in. That's where this comes from. The more you know. There you go. Yeah. So you know, Hoover's going to get, this guy comes into his time as president as a hero. He leaves as the GOAT. There's no doubt about it. The final straw here, and I mentioned it says bonus army. I think this is just wild here. There's a group of veterans throughout the United States. You know, they fought in World War I. They come home to the promise of a pension, which they're not getting anymore because of the Depression. A lot of these veterans are homeless now, and they're frustrated by that. So the bonus army was a group of homeless veterans that decided that they were going to march to Washington. And they actually, you know, some of these guys marched from across the country, marched to Washington in order to talk to Hoover and to ask the government to give them their pensions. Now, Hoover could have gone out and met with these guys, talked with them, reasoned with them, tried to make them feel better. Instead, what he does is he calls out the regular army. And as you can see from the photograph, all right, the soldiers, I don't know if you can tell what they're wearing. They've got gas masks on. So they gas these veterans. They shoot into the crowd for some of this. Some of these guys are killed in this. And, you know, pictures like this end up in the newspaper. Herbert Hoover, he's killing our veterans. As bad as he's already done, look what he's doing now. He's described as heartless. So when we get to 1932, we're going to have a presidential election. And the Democrats are going to run a guy named Franklin Roosevelt, who I'm pretty sure basically just had to stand up and say, "Hi, I'm not Herbert Hoover." That was all it was going to take. Herbert Hoover got absolutely destroyed in that election, paving the way for FDR. You know, easily one of the most famous presidents, and I think arguably one of the most successful presidents that we've ever had. He brings with him the New Deal, which creates a ton of jobs for Americans. We'll get into that next week. FDR is going to be the only president to get elected, not to one, not to two, not to 3, but to 4 terms as president of the United States. He gets elected in 32, and then he dies in 45 with 3 years left on his term. That is a long time to be in the White House. That's a long time to be in the White House. All right? So, looking over the questions, anything that you're missing or that you need me to talk a little bit more about? FDR. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. This is the guy who, really good public speaker. Whenever he was out in public, he was always standing behind a podium. And this was a guy that had polio when he was a child. So he was completely paralyzed from the waist down. So, he was either standing behind a podium or he was sitting down. A lot of Americans didn't know he was paralyzed. All right, they put him in a car or something where you couldn't tell that he was sitting down for a reason. Or they would have it set up to where they would have him stand at the podium and his legs would literally be locked into the podium so that he couldn't fall. That's the reality of that. All right, any other questions that you feel like I missed or I need to go over a little bit more, Dana? All right, so we said pizza Labor Day, 1929. And then Black Tuesday is October 29th. Any others? FDR wins, Hoover loses. Any others? Okay, so get your names on these, turns in the basket. And you've got some time. You got a good 10 minutes here if you want to get back on the stock market game. Don't forget tomorrow, stock markets or journals. Those are your 2 options for tomorrow. Thank you, guys. It won't take very long. Yeah, you can look it up. Journals won't be due until Tuesday. Just I'm getting back tomorrow. It's online. It's if you go to the website. It says journal prompts. Click on that. Somebody else.
I've seen worse ones.
Yes, sir. We've got a pretty good handle on it now. We've had to learn from our mistakes. Yeah, I'm listening. Well, we get to a point where we don't buy so much stuff. Driving the price of that stock actual value, what it's actually worth to you, but the amount of Gabby, have they got you squared away?
Yeah, I'm 20th right now.
Hey, that's not bad.